The angel, and he said to the angel, "Give me the little book." And what does it say? And he said unto me, "Take it and eat it up, and it shall make thy belly bitter, but it shall be in thy mouth sweet as honey." And I took the little book out of the angel's hand and ate it up, and it was in my mouth sweet as honey. And as soon as I had eaten it, my belly was bitter. And he said unto me, "Thou must prophesy again before many peoples and nations and tongues and kings." The close of the sounding of the seventh angel here, as he is bringing the seventh trumpet into history, is telling us that at the Sunday law we will prophesy again. Mm-hmm. Without a correct understanding of the trumpets, we don't understand the history of the 144,000. There's no way we can grasp it. And especially are we not going to be able to grasp the experience that they must have. It will be an identical experience as that of the Millerites. As the seventh trumpet opened, they had to be prepared for that event. And at the closing of the sounding of the seventh trumpet, when the judgment is about to close, the people of God must be prepared by the event, for the event, and the way they're prepared is by an understanding of the history of the Millerites. And we're way off, we're way behind the 8 ball in Adventism to understand this. We're just not there yet. And so when Revelation 10 is that interlude between the 6th and the 7th trumpet, is when Jesus is declared to be this mighty angel. It says, "The mighty angel who instructed John was no less a personage than Jesus Christ, setting his right foot on the sea and his left upon the dry land, shows the part which he is acting in the closing scenes of the great controversy." Now, we all admitted earlier that this was one of the closing scenes of the great controversy. But where are we in history from 1840? How many years down the road are we?
167.
165 years almost. So are we a little bit closer to the end of the great controversy?
Oh, yes.
Oh, yes.
Oh, yes.
Is Jesus still that mighty angel?
Oh,
Yes,
yes.
very much so.
Is his voice still speaking with the power and authority that he had
Very
on
much
August
so.
11th, 1840? It is for those who recognize it, but for those who do not, it has no authority. It has no authority. This is something that we need to grasp. That's what's in the understanding of the history of the trumpets. Now, this is demonstrated on these two charts. This history is demonstrated on these two
Yes.
charts, once we understand it. There are those in Adventism today who will take the power and authority out of the very words of Christ in Revelation chapter 10, and that they will say that the 2520 has no relevancy in Adventist history today. But the one who would close under the sounding of the 6th trumpet, when this chart would finish its work in bringing a people out of Babylon, when they would finish its work, it was under the warning message of the first angel, which included Miller's understanding of the 2520, that would lead him down to what he understood was the close of Daniel chapter 7. Miller understood that the 2520 and the 2300 days of Daniel 8:14 were leading down to the same event. And the Sabbatarian Adventists would conclude at the end of the disappointment that that event was the sounding of the 7th trumpet. Therefore, the 2520 is tied directly also to the history of the trumpets. And that's why Ellen White gives us the declaration that these two charts were made by the hand of the Lord.
Amen.
And he said he would not have them changed except by inspiration. And there are those in the church today who are changing these charts, and I can tell you the inspiration they're using is not from heaven. But yet they would declare it to be so. And they're giving this talk today as we speak in Loma Linda. What time is it now?
Almost 7.
We're probably over with the lecture, but there was a man in Loma Linda today that was delivering a lecture that would tell us that these charts have no validity. in the Advent cause at the end of the world.
They
Now,
said,
this is very frightening
Mm-hmm.
if you're a faithful Seventh-day Adventist. What I mean by faithful is that, do we really believe that God has called the people out of the churches in this history?
Yes.
yes.
And if we do, then we have to stand on the foundations. I have a good friend sitting over here on the sofa. Since he was a little boy, he knew that we'd had a prophet in the church. And since he was a little boy, his one thought was that if we have a prophet, if God had called the pioneers by his voice, then what the pioneers taught and believed is correct.
Mm-hmm.
And God impressed him with that since he was an 8-year-old or so. Now, the rest of us need to have that same impression
Mm-hmm.
here at the end of the world.
Amen.
Because if we don't, we're going to be on the wrong side of the issue.
Mm-hmm.
Because God has given to us as a people all of the information that we need.
Amen.
We started out our lecture this afternoon by understanding that through the prophet Amos, God reveals all of his secrets to his prophets. And I think we've covered today very clearly that through this understanding of, there are much more that we need to understand about the 7 trumpets in this history. And I can't really go into them in detail today, but we're going to try to cover more of these. And one of the places that we need to begin to understand how the 7 trumpets in this history have their impact is in some of that history that we covered today, in the idolatry that begins literally right after they cross the Jordan. I have some things that I wasn't able to share with those at the church that day, but let me see if I can dig them out to share with you. They're over here. This is it during the time of the judges, right here, in 1425 BC. This is Edersheim. It says, if evidence were required that each period of Old Testament history points for its completion to one still future, it would be found in the book of Judges. Edersheim is pointing out that what this history is telling us, it's pointing to something down that will be fulfilled in the future.
Okay.
This man was not a Seventh-day Adventist, but we who are Seventh-day Adventists can understand more than he did by his statement. This statement is accurate, even though he might not have recognized what we do in it, but his statement is very accurate. Let me read it again. If evidence were required that each period of Old Testament history points for its completion to one still future, it would be found in the book of Judges. He says, the history of the 3.5 centuries which it records, the book of Judges is 3.5 centuries. From the time they entered, notice, 1451 to, 1425, up through the time of King Saul is the period of the Judges. It's the history of the 3.5 centuries which it records brings not anything new to light, either in the life or history of Israel. It only continues what is already found in the book of Joshua, carrying it forward to the books of Samuel, and thence through Kings, till it points in this dim distance to the King of Israel, the Lord Jesus Christ. If what he's saying is true, and we believe it is, then the judges are also pointing to the opening up of the sounding of the 7th trumpet. Notice this, where who gives perfect rest, Christ gives perfect rest in the perfect kingdom. In the book of Joshua, we see 2 grand outstanding facts. One explaining the outer, the other the inner history of Israel. As for the latter, the inner history of Israel, we learn that ever since the sin at Baal Peor, if not before, idolatry had its hold upon the people. Not that the servants of the Lord was discarded, but that it was combined with the heathen rites of the nations around them. But as true religion was really the principle of Israel's national life and unity, unfaithfulness towards Jehovah was also closely connected with tribal disintegration, which was, as we have seen, threatened even in the time of Joshua. You'd have to, that's part of the study that I was going to give before the anniversary of 9/11 kind of interrupted where I was going. But we're gonna go back and get there. But you have to go back and read Edersheim's account of the book of Joshua, when he says that we already understood this from our understanding of the time of Joshua. Then, for the outer history of Israel, we learn that the completion of their possession of Canaan was made dependent on their faithfulness to Jehovah. Now, in 1 Kings today, if that prophet had remained faithful to Jehovah, would he have met the lion on the pathway?
No.
No. Just as the Christian can only continue to stand by the same faith in which, in his conversion to God, he first had access to Him, Romans 5:2. Romans is righteous by faith. So Israel could only retain the land and complete its conquest by the same faith in which she had first entered it. Right here, God had called the people to righteousness by faith. Right here. He called them to righteousness by faith. And the story of righteousness by faith, Ellen White says, is the third angel's message in verity. So when you see the people of God crossing the Jordan, where you can really grasp this thing and really sink your teeth into it, is in Joshua chapter 5. Go to Joshua chapter 5.
God called the people to what? Chapter 5. Joshua 5. God called the people to, right over there.
When he called them to cross the Jordan, I'm not sure.
What you said?
No. It's on the tape though. Joshua chapter 5. Notice, this is very similar. We read earlier today, lately we've been starting these meetings off with a quote from Great Controversy, page 343, that God's dealings with men are ever the same in every age. And this will prove this out. Notice in Joshua chapter 5, we have the story of, they keep the Passover at Gilgal. This is right after they cross the Jordan. God, in a very miraculous way,
Tell us what?
we haven't named the verse yet.
Oh, okay.
In Joshua chapter 5, we have already crossed the Jordan, but when they make their first encampment at Gilgal, the manna ceases and they begin to eat the old fruit of the land, because God has brought them into their inheritance. And notice verse 3, it says, "And Joshua made him sharp knives, and circumcised the children of Israel at the hill of the foreskin." That's a Hebrew word. I can't pronounce it. The margin says, I can't pronounce it. Gibeahhaaraloth.
Ooh,
I
okay.
can't pronounce that. And this is the cause why Joshua did circumcise all the people that came out of Egypt that were males. Even all the men of war died in the wilderness by the way after they came out of Egypt. Now all the people that came out were circumcised, but all the people that were born in the wilderness by the way as they came out from Egypt, then they had not circumcised. Now we know that the circumcision was the sign of the covenant.
Right.
But Paul tells us that the circumcision of the heart now is where the sign is
Right.
the reality.
Right.
He says, "For the children of Israel," verse 6, "walked 40 years in the wilderness till all the people that were men of war, which came out of Egypt, were consumed, because they obeyed not the voice of the Lord, unto whom the Lord sware that He would give us a land that floweth with milk and honey." Now let's read down to verse 10. "And the children of Israel encamped in Gilgal, and kept the Passover on the 14th day of the 7th month at even, in the plains of Jericho. And they did eat the old corn of the land on the morrow after the Passover, unleavened cakes, parched corn, in the selfsame day. And the manna ceased on the morrow after they had eaten the old corn of the land." Now here it comes. Neither had the children of Israel manna